So for the past 4 years we've been working on a workshop methodology to support the development of design patterns for education and learning.
These workshops brought together people from diverse backgrounds into the same space and have included participants from the banking sector, from trade unions, from games design and software engineers addressing issues around organisational change, social action and not simply disciplinary domains.
So these workshops are focused on the development of design patterns which originally come from the field of architecture and were put forth by Christopher Alexander, and they've since been used in fields such as software engineering and most recently in educational technology.
What you're going to see on this video are a series of clips from workshops that we've been running with a series of practitioners from different fields and different domains. So you'll notice that each of the clips is slightly different, but they do conform to a common pattern.
The video should be useful for you if you're about to participate in such a workshop and want to know what to expect, or if you'd like to run a workshop or a series of workshops of this sort yourself.
What I want you to do is think of a building which needs some writing on it, right? And do your writing on the wall. So kind of do the outline of the building which you'd like to spray paint, and sort of do the graffiti, whether it's just text or image or whatever you'd like to see sort of written on that wall.
Yeah.
Any social space. Put your wall on the table and show it to the people that's sitting around you. That's sort of a way of introducing yourself.
It's one of the first example of the auxiliary toolkit. It's a sort of an icebreaker we use a lot of times to create a sort of circle of trust around the table. So we pick you pick some idea that's relevant to the theme of the workshop, and people express themselves through drawing, and then they talk about what they drew. And that puts everybody on equal ground, because none of us is a professional draftsman. None of us can actually draw very well. So, and it already brings in the personal element. From that we move quite quickly to actual sharing of case stories.
So that's why we came up with the structure of a case story workshop, where essentially people use the template, which I think you've seen, which leads you through describing, giving it's a narrative, but it's a sort of a scaffolded, guided narrative of a problem which you were faced with and how you solved it. And then we use a collaborative process to get out and flesh out all the details of that.
Starting with the situation, I started blogging maybe 3 years ago now, because there was a buzz around blogging and I'm a learning technologist. Now,
The key is that as those case stories are elaborated, other people then find that they can see where their narratives fit in with that case story as well. So they do participate and become participatory in the final narration.
So we had, we're using this three hats type of discussion, right? When one person tells a story, the others interrogate them, somebody takes down the notes, and then somebody else, the one who didn't, has to retell the story to a larger group. And the rationale behind this is that it's not easy to tell a good story. You need some help, and the help comes in the form of someone who has a good incentive to pull the story out of you, because he or she will need to retell it later.
So three hats is an example of what we call the auxiliary toolkit. It's a set of smaller scale patterns more focused on solving specific issues or specific critical problems in the process of the workshops. Some of them we use at a particular point in the process, and some of them we use over and over again whenever appropriate.
So one of the benefits of the Design Patterns workshop is it brings people from different backgrounds together. So for example, you may have someone from the trade union and someone from banking, but one of the key patterns from the auxiliary toolkit enables the participants to share experiences from their own domain, and then using this reminds me of pattern from the auxiliary toolkit, someone else in a different domain will relate their experience to that.
We are now going to look at the forces that create the problem or solve the problem.
No, sorry, describe the problem. The problem is there because there's some tension between different forces. So some forces are aligned, and some forces are in tension, right? So what you want to do is you want to draw these different forces, give each one some sort of iconic representation, and then draw the arcs between them, say which forces are aligned, which forces are conflicting, and which don't really interact at all. Go wild with paper, use a lot of paper. You can even do each force on a different piece of paper and then stick them up with blue tack on the board for your presentation. The force mapping is used in a very specific point where you're trying to really flesh up the problem section of a pattern. And one way to describe the problem that a pattern tries to address is as a diagram of competing forces. So in architecture you'd say, well, on one hand there's gravity, and then the other hand there's, I don't know, you want the balcony to stick out so long. So those are those physical forces. In a social situation you have people's desires and things they're trying to achieve, various different constraints. And so the force mapping is when you get people to actually sit around the table and draw a diagram of one of the forces in action in this problem. Tabletop concept mapping, which is another auxiliary pattern, is something which we use in different transition phases, say in the transition from cases to patterns or from patterns to scenarios. And again, it's a way of establishing a common language, coming up with a shared vocabulary that we agree on, but also identifying the gaps in this vocabulary. So we get people to look at a text or a collection of texts, draw out the key concepts, write them out on little notes, and then connect those using string or crayon or markers or whatever. Whatever material we have at hand. But the thing is, they're doing it collaboratively with physical objects, with what you would call objects to talk with, which is another pattern.
So we come to the point in the case story workshops where we have the presentations, and these are really driven by the three hats pattern, which are twofold. One is to focus the narratives that are being told by assigning the different roles, so that the person who's getting up to present within their group has spent some time looking in detail at the information around the kinds of experiences that people have been sharing. And the second is important, is that to share that across all of the other groups to then also make an inclusive narrative, so that others who have similar experience as well can share that within the whole workshop.
So we looked at it, we defined our problem first of all as what do you do when you get dragged into an acrimonious dispute against your will? So say for example, if you happen to care about a Wikipedia page, somebody puts rubbish on it and then you say, no, that's rubbish, this is the truth. And then the two people get embroiled, and what happens is you both look like idiots. It doesn't matter whether you're the one saying the sensible thing or not. So we looked at what you might do in order to kind of save your identity and your reputation, which is kind of under threat.
After you've gone through the stories, then the idea is to move from these stories to patterns. And design patterns are structures which abstract one step away from the case study. So you look at the case study and say, all right, let's look at what's the element of design that made this case study successful. Not the whole thing, just one element. So one problem that emerges from this case study, which is probably more general than a single case, the context and the method of solution.
I think the main goal of this exercise is to come up with a tough analysis of the requirements that are in your problem, domain. So,
I was writing down.
For instance, at the end we want to end up with some patterns. So patterns.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the whole goal of the day, although we haven't said this so far. But these patterns, they give you a problem, they give you a solution, and they explain why the solution solves the problem, and thereby help you to better perform your future work.
And then we come to the presentations during the pattern mining workshops, and here the group that have been gathering together the key problem, solution, context and forces during the process of pattern mining then get up to present to the audience each of those different sections of their pattern, and to try and articulate to the rest of the group the kinds of issues and the way that they've been solving them, that they have been collaboratively working on, and again open that to discussion across the workshop participants, and as well look for links between the different patterns that have been developed by the different groups.
When we come up with a pattern, we have very strong intuitions about it. We think it really works. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't bother publishing it on the web. But we need a way to validate that. And one of the ways we found effective in validating that is looking at new problems which haven't been solved yet. And that's what we call future scenarios. So a case story tells about a problem which you've confronted and overcome in the past. A scenario tells about a problem which you foresee in the future, or something that you're dealing with at the moment and you don't have a solution for it. And if the patterns we've come up are any good, they should help us solve real problems, right? Because that's what design is about. So the idea is, and this is the main theme of this workshop, is to then go through scenarios and say, all right, this scenario I see, I can apply this pattern, and it gives me a head start on the solution. Another option is that that doesn't happen, and you don't see a pattern that applies, but you can reflect on your personal experience or somebody's personal experience in the group and say, I've done something similar. And that might lead us to identify a new pattern.
So we come to the presentations in the Future Scenarios workshops, and really this is the culmination of all the hard work that has been put in over the previous 2 workshops developing the patterns, and here people apply those patterns to solve new problems.
And that discussion usually then leads into the concluding plenary, which would have a sort of broader scope of reflection.
What I found interesting from a more methodological point of view was to see how people who are not so used to patterns started to work with them, and with all the critique that comes in, with all the creative way of applying them. That's always for people like me who have been writing patterns for several years now. This is always again an interesting but also challenging experience.
So people would then reflect on the process as a whole and where they see this going forward in a sort of metacognitive level, both drawing lessons from across the 3 workshops regarding the content and regarding the methodology itself. A lot of times people would say, okay, I've learned something specific about how to solve a problem at hand, but I've also learned something about how to deal with design issues at a general scale.
I don't know, I think this whole process enabled kind of clearer thinking and so on, and it's obviously helped me to inform my strategy to use mine as a case study, which is great. So I've come up with a strategy based on, looking at the patterns and learning from you all and from the book as well.
Okay, what you see now is the description of the participatory pattern workshop methodology, where at the high level this is a pattern of 3 workshops, and this is the case story workshop, the pattern mining workshop, and the future scenarios workshop. But these 3 workshops also share a common internal structure. So there's a pattern to their structure, and then each one of them had its specific nuances and variants. And then you've seen also a few auxiliary patterns, which are more like techniques we use when we're running these workshops in various points, various critical points. This is all work in progress. We're continuously running more workshops and learning more and refining the methodology.
And this, of course, is ongoing work. So if you do find yourself using the participatory workshops yourself, we'd be really pleased to hear from you and for you to input into the project and get in touch with us.
And if you do end up running a workshop on your own, please contact us and share your lessons with us so they can feed back into the next iteration of this methodology.